well, I guess I can talk about my influences in terms of painting. There was quite the trend of shit. Sorry, there was quite the trend of hand painted comics in the 90s, primarily in Europe. It was quite popular. Um, I know what some of the comics look like, but I can't remember any of their names because they're all in fucking foreign language, in fucking Europe languages, Italy and France and that. Um, but that did inspire a bunch of British artists to do similar things. Very much popularised in the pages of 2000 AD, the comic which spawned Judge Dredd, which is quite a popular character nowadays. Well, I guess here and there, less so in some places, more so in others. But yeah, so there was Judge Dredd, Slain, some other shit. I don't know. Those were the good ones. Judge Dredd and Slain. Slain's like not a Viking, a Celtic warrior, like a barbarian, all muscly and shirtless, fucking shit up with an axe. It's good shit. And Judge Dredd was Judge Dredd. If you don't know who he is, then fucking, what are you doing? Look him up, you ball bags. But yeah, so there's primarily an artist called Glenn Fabry. I think that's how his name's pronounced, Fabry or Fabry or something. He's my top idol, which you shouldn't have idols at all. But he's the guy sort of responsible for me painting at all. His sense of anatomy and just colour and light and stuff in general is insane, just beyond comprehension, really. So he's the main culprit for why I paint the way I do. And then, of course, there's Simon Bisley, who's like the big one. Everyone knows Simon Bisley. Big Mr. Biz, the big guy. His work on, the Judge Dredd Batman crossover especially was very, very well renowned for being one of those great comic book crossovers, especially art-wise. The art that came out of that was pretty insane. Again, if you've not seen it, look it up. And then there's like Jim Murray and Greg Staples and a few others who all sort of frontiered this hand-painted comic book aesthetic, which was, as I say, very popular in the 90s. Less so nowadays with the advent of digital art sort of taking over comic books and such. In fact, even with these, not to say 2000 AD is independent, but sort of, maybe on a slightly smaller scale publishing-wise, books and such, they won't even look at portfolios of traditional paintings. It all has to be digital, because that's just the way the old industry is going. Unfortunately, because digital art's cool, but it just sort of lacks some of the life and energy that traditional art has. I feel anyway, in my bloody humble opinion. One of the primary things for liking that sort of artwork, for me at least, is I don't know if it's the reason why it was so popular, other than it looks good, especially in terms of a comic book, but also being that it's painted with acrylics, which is what I'm using now. They're very quick to use. It dries very quickly. They're very just quick and easy materials to use, and so comic books have to be created quickly. You only have a short amount of time to make them and get them to print. So it's, if you're going to be painting a comic, acrylics is the way to do it. Excuse me. And also the paintings that come out of it, especially in terms of Bisley and Staples and Fabory, is they don't shy away from sort of showing the paint. So, you know, as the very basics of how I paint, you know, learned from their techniques is you have the image. This one is a print from a friend of mine that I'm painting over. Then you put down just a quick sort of underpainting, so you can see the line art obviously underneath. A quick underpainting of dark red I usually use. It gives quite a natural undercolor to everything else you put on top of it. Different colours are good. If you're going for like aliens and watery stuff, blues and greens are quite cool to use as underpaintings, and even then painting flesh tones on top of those colours gives some interesting effects. But in general, dark red is sort of what I lean towards. It's a very sort of handy all-purpose colour. And then, yeah, you just start layering colours and tones and lights and stuff on top of that. And the being that it's done so quickly, it's you can often see the brush strokes, you can see the layers. You know, you'll leave the underpainting here for the shadows, so you can see just by looking at one of their finished, you know, comic book paintings, you can see the underpainting, the line work, the lower layers of colours, the mid-tones, the highlights. You can see it all in one piece. So just looking at that artwork is like its own little how to paint, you know, image. You can see how the image was created by looking at the image, which is quite an important thing, I think, in artwork. There seems to be, you know, something I learned, I guess, through art is most art forms, I guess traditional art forms, and even digital and whatever, they will often, and you know, this is speaking generally, it's not really a coverall term, but it's very much the case, it seems to me, in my opinion. All right, Ewan, just say the bloody thing. That people tend to try to hide the medium in the image. So if it's painted with oils, it's very well blended, and you know, people try and disguise the fact that it's even a painting. They try to make it look very realistic, which is, you know, cool. By all means, do that. But I think it's nice to not be afraid to show that you're using paint or pen, and that's why I think I like to use paints and pens, and it's the same thing with spray paint as well. You know, there's I guess it's very much for the layman to look at a painting made with spray paint, or I guess spray paint, we can take that as an example, that if they can look at it and say, wow, I didn't even realise it was made with spray paint, because they hide that fact with, you know, blending techniques and such, which again is cool, and you can get some great results out of that, but it's you know, it can give sort of dull and lifeless results, because then you're left with just an image which is like cool, but that's it. Whereas if you can see that it's painted with spray paint, acrylic, pen, whatever it is, then, you know, it's a bit more interesting to look at, to see all the brush strokes and fucking whatever else. Which, you know, can lead on to the whole topic of, you know, photorealism in painting, and which is, you know, it's cool, I guess, but kind of meh. And that's my thoughts on that. Obviously, and you know, I'm not breaking new ground by saying any of this. This is just something to fill time with, really. There's a great deal of skill involved in creating an image that looks like a photo. So if you can use paint in such a way that you can't even tell it's paint, and it looks just like a photograph or an actual thing, then that's brilliant. That's fantastic. But I would argue that, especially if you are doing photorealism, which is, basically copying from a photographic reference, then it's almost like, what's the point? Other than practice, like to hone your skills as a painter, you've got to learn from somewhere, and you've got to take your reference and figure out where the light goes and how you'd go about recreating that on a page. But in terms of creating an image or a piece of artwork, it's kind of dull. It doesn't really leave you with anything interesting to look at, because the picture exists, doesn't it? Like, that's cool, and now I've just remade that picture. Which is what I feel kind of with my nudes, because obviously, if you haven't seen them, find them on my Instagram or whatever. I'm recreating photos, but doing it with big pens, using cross hatching and stuff, it recreates them in a different kind of way. They don't look like photographs, they look like drawings, which again goes back to my point that I'm not hiding the medium in the artwork. It's all right there. It's a drawing, it's got lines, it's got little ink splodges and scratches and stuff, and it's not really perfect, but it's creating an image that's like a bit more fun to look at. Yeah. Also, you may have noticed through these videos, if you've watched more than one of them, that obviously I have my ewan character voice, which is all crazy and wacky and whoa, isn't this bloody bananas? But it's hard to keep that up all the time, so you may find that if I'm talking about things at length, art and such, that I do begin to drone, and maybe I'll start sounding like this because I'm just talking and talking and talking and whatever. But I try and keep the energy up, guys. I can only do that so much, and obviously it's quite late at night because that's the only time I really do things. But don't worry, I've taken plenty of caffeine pills to try and get me through this recording. Lord knows I'm not about to do it on my own merit. I need some kind of help. Let's look in the viewfinder. Oh, this is looking all right, actually. It's always a bit worrying painting skin, especially when you're trying to make it look smooth and such. Part of the technique of painting, I don't even know if the technique really has a name as such. Hand-painted comic book style of painting or whatever. Is just sort of to lay the colour down, so splotches, strokes and whatever, just get the colour on there in such a way that you can tell what's going on. And you can do really nice skin tones even with that. But, if you've got the time and the patience and effort to actually make a finished piece, it's nice to smooth out your tones a little bit. But then, of course, you might realise that actually you're not really a painter. You're good at getting colour onto a picture, but then when it comes to sort of actually blending and smoothing things out, things start to get a little bit trickier. Which I've always said is with my paintings, I don't really... Well, I mean, they're paintings in as much as they're made with paint, but I'm always at pains to really refer to them as paintings, because it's sort of... they're not really painted. Whereas, I guess, traditionally, you have a blank canvas, piece of paper, whatever, and then you use paint to block out the image and then the shadows and different bits and pieces, and then you sort of blend and shade and highlight up to your finished piece. Whereas mine, I always start with a drawing and then I colour it in with paint. It doesn't you know, I've painted more traditional pieces in my time, and as such, these ones have never really felt like paintings, as in the traditional sense. You know. But that's one of those like fucking semantic things. Like it's all down to personal whatever. It doesn't really matter. I guess it's a painting. It's a picture made with paint. It's a painting, isn't it? Maybe it's not. I don't know. As also when you're painting skin, you realise, you know, how much attention you have to pay to skin tones in general. You don't want the whole thing to be one uniform colour. You want to leave sort of like more blood-filled areas pink, and then there's like, you know, in general you have like sun-kissed shoulders, and then the chest and rib area is bound to be a little bit paler. And, you know, it's always, if painting boobs, it's always good to make them a bit paler than the rest of the body, and especially chest area. It just makes them look a bit more voluminous. Voluminous? Gives them more volume, which is sort of the point, isn't it? Painting with volume as opposed to paint. I think it's coming out okay. I'm checking the viewfinder now and again just to see how it's coming along, to see how you're seeing it as opposed to seeing it how I'm seeing it. But yeah, I mean, please do let me know if you have any viewpoints on painting traditionally or digitally or photorealistically, or if you agree or disagree with anything I'm saying. Please do leave a comment somewhere saying such. It'd be good to not spark a debate. I don't really care about it enough to want to debate the issue. I don't stick to my guns enough to really care all that much. You know, I'm not trying to bend anyone's opinion to match my own. If you prefer things a certain way, then that's entirely up to you, and I respect that. But you're wrong, because how I do it is the proper way to do it. Ha 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 ha. And tee hee hee. I'm happy with this. How this is coming out at the moment. So that's good. It's always a good sign when you're painting something and you actually like how it's coming out. Oh, who'd have thought that would ever happen? So few things in life really work out the way you want them to, so it's nice to know that a painting can do it sometimes. Blend in the pale bits into the less pale bits. Gosh, I actually quite like how this is going. Cool. This is going to be the very last painting in my book of paintings that I'm putting together. I'm getting it painted especially for that reason. So it's a nice sort of end piece. My most recent work in my most recent book, which will be nice. Which got funded very quickly, so if you're watching this and you helped fund that, thank you somewhat, I suppose. I guess you helped. Yeah, I'm excited to get it out there. I've just about finished putting it together. I've got to get this painting in there. That'll pretty much be done, which is fucking cool. Should I talk more about how I paint? I mean, how I paint is very different to how I draw. How I draw is I start with a white page, obviously, and I build up lines and then work into shadows eventually. Whereas with painting, I start with a darker page and build up to the lights, which is the opposite way, but it's similar in that I don't really know what I'm doing, and I don't really know how to describe what I'm doing. So that's good. I'll make a video talking about how I am no good at talking about what I'm doing. I did have a point there, but I lost it. It left my head on its way to its tongue. Its tongue, my tongue, the tongue. My apologies for that. I'm sure it will come back to me at some point. And if it does, I'll let you know. I'm content with how this is going so far. This is good. This is very, very good. There's many times where, you know, I've gone to paint something and, you know, even at this stage, this is early stages, that it's very clear that it's just not quite working out as I'd hoped. And, you know, you either scrap it or just power through and paint over and over and over, layers and layers and layers, and hope for the best. But yeah, I think already I'm liking how this is coming out. And of course, again, with this technique, it's it works best with as few layers as possible. It's sort of like this is about as bar a couple more like finer highlights on top of that. That's about as layered as you want to get it. Is if you start putting too many more layers on top of that, it looks laboured and it starts to almost look like a different painting, I guess, because the whole thing is predicated on the fact that you can see as I said, the line work, the underpainting, the midtones and everything. But then if you start covering everything up with layers and layers of paint, it starts to look like a whole other painting in a whole other style, which is something to be avoided. Which is risky in a way, because if you screw up, you can paint over it, you know, maybe once or twice to a degree, but then if you're going to have to do any more than that, you really are probably going to have to just start again. So you kind of have to get it in almost the first go, which, you know, if you're creating any kind of artwork, that's quite the daunting task. And don't be fooled. A lot of the drawings, especially the drawings you see on my Instagram and such, they're always, not always, very often, they've gone through at least a couple of rough stages, and maybe I've traced a rough drawing to get to the final product because I just can't quite manage to recreate the shape, which I find in speaking to other creators and such, that's quite a common issue, is drawing something rough and just not being able to recreate that at all. Like you're working on a pose for a thing, fucking, you know, a comic book character or whatever, you get that superhero pose and it's perfect and you're like, fucking yes, and then you try and draw it neat, you know, on a bigger scale maybe, and it just doesn't work. You just cannot recreate that whatsoever. And I've done that. I've drawn tiny little sketches of you know, poses and things, and then gone to recreate them and failed horribly, and then scanned in that tiny little thumbnail and then blown it up on the computer, traced it just to get that you know, bigger, better image. And you know, there's no harm in that. You do whatever you have to do to create the image you want. And I guess that's another thing worth talking about, is tracing. Is it acceptable? I say yes, absolutely, to a degree, obviously. If you're tracing just a generic reference photo because you need to just get this one pose or whatever it is, then absolutely. If you're tracing your own work, then yeah, of course. If you've drawn a picture you're trying to recreate in another manner and you just want to trace it quick, get it out and redo it, then yeah, fucking whatever. But of course then you get into, like, you know, you shouldn't ever really trace another person's work to reappropriate it to your own style or whatever. Even if it's a pose or something, it's a very tricky and dicey sort of subject and world to be getting into. There's no clear answer of yes, tracing's okay, or no, it's absolutely not. It's very much circumstantial, and you have to take it on a case by case basis. And either way, whichever stance you take, someone's going to disagree with you. So again, there's just no real right or wrong. It just is what it is. But ultimately, who gives a fuck? If you want to make an image and part of making that image involves tracing something, fucking do it. People get far too, I don't know, incensed about these kinds of things. Like, who cares? You can look at it in a very grandiose, fucking over the top melodramatic way of, we're only here for a short while, do what you like, fucking trace the image, which, yeah, it's a bit much to say so, but at the same time there is some truth in that, because who gives a shit ultimately? Eventually everything you ever create is just going to be dust anyway. It's all going to be fucking burnt or thrown away, or it's just going to rot over time. So there's no point in being too precious about any of it. So if you need to trace, or even not need, just want to trace to help you build the picture you're trying to build, then fucking do it. Who gives a shit? Fucking trace everything. There's a hugely popular artist by the name of Drew Struzan, who does movie posters. I can guarantee you've seen them. He's done Indiana Jones, Shawshank Redemption. Whoops. He did a bunch of Harry Potter that I don't think they used. He's done loads of Guillermo del Toro's ones, Hellboy and Pan's Labyrinth. Loads and loads of movie posters, all hand painted, which is brilliant. And his technique is off the chain, as young people might say. And they're brilliant, just so iconic. You can't miss them. If you see one, you know it instantly. Only very recently did I find out that he traces to get his artwork. His one of the sort of standout points of his posters are the incredible likenesses he gets in his portraits of the actors and stars in the films. Which I can be honest and say I was always blown away. These just getting a proper likeness of a person in a portrait is one of the most difficult things to do in art ever that I've found. Drawing hands and feet and fucking whatever is a piece of piss. I can do that in my sleep. Getting a proper likeness of a person in a portrait is insanely difficult. It takes so much practice, and I've never ever gotten it on the first try. It's always taken multiple tries to get it. And I saw Drew Struzan's work, and I thought, fuck this guy in his arsehole. How does he do that? That's insane. Turns out he bloody traces them. That's how he gets the likenesses. Which is, he projects the image onto a big piece of paper, and I guess I assume he doesn't just Google image. I guess he probably gets official photos from the movie companies that he's doing posters for. Either way, he projects them onto paper, traces them, paints them, colours them in, however he does, and then he does his thing, and it's all good and gravy. I saw it was a video on YouTube. I think I just happened to be looking him up and saw, ooh, this is the guy painting. Cool, I'll watch that. And then he starts fucking tracing his portraits. What the fuck is he doing? I was at first a bit like, I felt like I lost some respect for him. Because, being in the art world, if I can be said to be such. I was a bit like, well, it's like it takes less talent to trace than it does to actually do. But then it's like, who fucking cares? It's what you do with the traced image. You know, it's not about the fact that you're tracing, is just whatever. It's what you do with that. If you just trace the whole thing and then you just recreate the picture that you're tracing, then, you know, that's cool, I guess, but whatever, who gives a shit. I think the work is in that instance is going to speak for itself. You know, the effort you put into the work shows through in the final result. So if you just literally trace an image from scratch and you recreate the entire thing, that's going to be what your finished piece looks like. It's going to look like it's all been traced and whatever. But then if you're tracing to get the very basic shape or just that likeness of the character, and then you take that and do your own shit with it, like True Struzl does, then fucking A, do it. And do it bloody well. And make a shitload of money doing it for official movie posters and become one of like the most renowned movie poster artists ever to have lived ever. And why bloody not? And, you know, it's a debate that will probably never end, because everyone loves to have their opinion and make it known. And, oh, I think you should never trace because you give it better to. Well, yeah, but if you're trying to create an image, as long as you're able to do it, then you should be able to. Oh, well, I think you do. Shut up. No one cares. Ultimately, art's kind of fucking useless. I mean, it's cool and, you know, therapeutic, and it gives some people nice shit to look at, and it's whatever, but it's just fucking pictures. Who gives a shit if someone's tracing or if they've managed to capture the likeness on their own? As long as you've got cool shit to look at, who gives a shit how it got there? And I'd argue that's the point. Like, just make cool shit to look at, because there's enough art out there that's just garbage, and, you know, fucking conceptual art has its place, and I get it and appreciate some of it, and, you know, even the stuff I don't appreciate, I at least accept and understand. But it's sort of, it's just, it exists. I'm not going out of my way to look at it or, you know, experience it if it's not necessarily visual. But it's just like, whatever. Take it or leave it. Give a shit, who cares? Ultimately, just make cool shit to look at. I don't care how you do it, just fucking do it. Doesn't matter if it's fucking traced or stolen or what the fuck ever, as long as it's good. No, not even good, even if it's bad, as long as you're doing it. I will say that as well. If it comes from an honest place where you're genuinely just trying and you're just making shit because you want to make shit, even if it doesn't really look what you might consider good, whatever that means, fucking doesn't matter, just make things. Make more things exist. Especially since, you know, I'm not going to be making any more humans. Lord knows I'm not having children, ever. So, in absence of that, in lieu of that, fucking art is where it's at. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make pictures exist in place of people. Pictures, not people. That's what I say. Put it on a t-shirt, you fucking mug. Or don't, I suppose, be the easiest option. I feel like I should talk more about technique and how I go about creating. What do I keep in mind when I'm creating images? I try to keep a general tone in my pictures. So in terms of colour, obviously I'm using red in all of the skin tones to keep all of the skin tones vaguely red, because it's a demon chick, little horns. So I want to keep it overall looking quite red, and the background is going to be an even brighter red, probably from the bottom up. And excuse me. And I think that's an important thing, is not to just go, this is skin color, this is red, this is black, this is green. It gets a bit much, unless you're creating an image specifically like that, in which case fucking go ahead. But this is what I do. And it's similar when I do comic book work as well. If I'm doing a whole page, which again, learning from the who not really taught me, but who I learned from, I do like to hand paint my comics. And each page I like to give an overall colour, theme, or just vibe in general. So it's not just like lots of different panels pasted together on the thing. It all fits together. In general, I sort of go by the setting in that set of pages. So wherever they are, I did a science fiction graphic novel, and there's this, they were in this sort of like marketplace area in a space station, which I had orange on all the walls, so the whole vibe of those few pages was just orange in general in the backgrounds, and then orange lighting and orange in like the skin tones and stuff, and then different places with different colours and tones like that. And that's quite a big overall thing, but in general I think that's a good rule to keep in mind when making pictures, is the tone of the piece. And again, the underpainting in how I paint is a very sort of good thing to keep that going. If you're painting something watery, then you're going to use blues and greens in your underpainting. Something in space, it's quite good to use like purples, dark purples, maybe a little bit of blue, but not too much, a little bit of blue. But again, red's a pretty safe one. And the underpainting, of course, is so, well, not so, but it's, I guess I've come to realise that it's good for this reason. If you paint straight onto a white background and you paint colour here, colour there, anything you happen to leave is going to leave a little white specks showing through the painting, which I've tried doing paintings like that, as I said, and you can make it work, or you can just paint the fucking thing properly and then it'll work. But ultimately, if you've got underpainting, so like all this shadow here and here and here, it's taken care of. It's done. You don't have to worry about it. The underpainting is taking care of that for you, which is brilliant. The less work you have to do, the better, really. And again, I've got a full-time job as well as all my artwork and stuff. I don't really have time to spend days and days painting things perfectly, so any time-saving techniques I can use, I'm gonna snap those sons of bitches up. Now, you gotta be a bit careful with these like hotter highlights. Don't throw them all over the place, just stick enough in that it gives it a bit more depth and shit. Again, I'm looking in the viewfinder every now and again just to check it's okay, and I think it's coming out pretty nice. Let me know what you guys think. Is this a successful painting? I believe it is. Again, I haven't actually painted properly in quite a long time. I've done a couple of sort of one-off images, commissions and stuff, but I've not really paid too much attention to proper paintings in quite a while. So being that that's the case, I'm quite happy with how this one's coming out. And that's another thing I like to do in my paintings, is when you're adding shadow into any picture, it's really easy to go, well, this is in shadow, and this is in shadow, and this is in shadow, and this is in shadow. And then you've got lots of shadows sort of dotted around the piece, which, you know, like anything cool, it can work, but it can look a little bit sort of scattered and, you know, not bad because of that, but the shadows just look a bit bitty. They're just here and there. They're not really focused. So I often, excuse me, will try and graduate most of, if not the whole image, shadow, and then fade it into highlights at the top. So I think that's worked out quite well here. I'm keeping these, you know, I'm happy to keep them looking rough and underpainted. Again, going back to my teachers, as it were. Yeah, not focus too much on the parts that don't really matter. This is sort of the main crux of the image. So this is all like fadey, shadow, whatever, cool. And then you go details and such where they matter. And then the highlights right there, which I think is quite cool. And again, I'm pretty happy with this, how this has been coming out. It's good. The face might fuck me up a little bit. Have to see how well I do or do not do on that. I guess we'll find out, won't we? Just have to be careful, not overdoing the highlights, but the face is something you want to keep smooth, especially on this sort of picture. She's supposed to be quite a, I guess, a young, soft, innocent looking gal, so you don't want to have loads of harsh lines and shadows. You want to make all the shading quite soft and delicate, which can be tricky at the best of times, let alone with paint. Try and put in the detail where necessary without making it look silly, which is, again, can be tricky, to say the least. Right, I think what I'm going to do now is stop talking, and I'm just going to finish the painting, and on the video it will go whoosh through the painting. Before I do so, I'll make a couple of vocal notes to let you know what I'm doing, what I plan on doing. I'll finish off the skin tones, and then I'm going to pop in sort of the finer details, the eyes and the tongue and such. Maybe work some highlights into the horns and things, and then I'll bring some the hair. I'm undecided at the moment. I'll see what I do when I get there. I may lighten it with some like dull dark browns and then a couple of white highlights just to bring out the top of it, but leave this bottom bit faded as the artist of the drawing had originally desired, with the fade of the hair. And I'll put some highlights into the ropes and the bikini top, just to sort of bring those out a bit. And then I'm going to use an ink pen, just like a, you know, like a drawing pen, like that, to tidy up these black lines and details in the face and stuff. Because it may be a painting, but I'll fucking draw on it if I want to, because it's mine and I do what I like. But yeah, so I guess just fucking chill out and watch the rest of this video speed up as I finish this thing.